Hey guys, Sarah here. So this video is going to be a very interesting one. I've had a few different requests here and there, but there were some controversial things that came up that really spurred me to want to do this video, and it might actually have to be in two parts. So one part of this video that I'm going to do later, not this one, but the next video that I make is going to be over like former morph names, like morph names that used to be used that aren't really used anymore. But this video is going to be the slightly more controversial video about morph names that really aren't morph names. And what I mean by that is people making things up, like new names up for things that already exist, potentially just to make money and to say they have something new. But before I get into that, I just want to ask, like, if you like corn snake content and you're interested in this, please subscribe and like the video or comment or share or anything like that. Everything helps the channel, and I recently got monetized, yay, which I know you guys are probably like tired of ads, but the ads were already on my videos anyway, so now at the very least I am getting a little bit back for doing these videos. Before this, I was not getting paid or anything to do it. So now, as far as YouTube is concerned, I've made a whole like $11.39. Congratulations to me, which I know is not much, but anything that you do does help the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. So I'm going to do these from least controversial to most controversial, and these are pretty much going to be just like morph names that were never really needed to begin with, in my opinion. Or at the very least, like, I'm letting you know what these morph names are so that you know exactly what you're getting when something is advertised as these things. Not all of these are just people trying to make money. A lot of these occurred because someone thought they had something new. They went ahead and named it, and then later on they found out that it wasn't something new, which happens unfortunately a lot because something will pop up and someone will say, oh, like this is so cool and it looks so different from X, Y, and Z, but then once they do some breeding trials, it turns out it's the same thing as something else. So the least controversial of these is actually going to be all of the different coral things, the coral complex as it is known, which are all a form of red factor. So I did a video on, I believe it was red factor versus red coat before. I've also done a video on strawberry versus coral in the past. So if you'd like to go see those videos, I will go ahead and put them in cards above for you guys to go watch those if you want. There aren't like photos up on the screen in those videos just because I didn't have the capability to do that at the time. I will probably eventually redo those videos, especially those ones, because they are very like, you really need the visual examples for those, and I really wasn't able to provide those before. So eventually I'll redo those videos, not doing that right now, but just kind of mentioning, if you would like just information on this, that's where that information is. I also have the majority of this information in my books. I have two corn snake books. They are the Corn Snake Cultivar compilations, 1 and 2. The first one goes over base mutations like amel, tessera, stuff like that. And then the other goes over the selectively bred morphs, such as like Okati or fluorescent and stuff like that. So if you're interested in the majority of this information, there's going to be some information in my books that are not in my videos, and there's going to be some information in the videos that are not in my books, partially because the books are a couple years old now and there is new information out, but also partially because in some ways I'm able to go into more detail and in more depth in the books than I am in a video, but then in some ways I'm able to go into more detail or depth in a video where I wasn't able to in the books. So it kind of is a give and take, but a lot of the information on corn snakes is going to be in those two books. Just mentioning it, they are available on my website, sarahsnakeshop.com. So the coral complex, as it is known, is probably, though it seems controversial, it's not controversial in the sense that anybody's really going to be fighting over it at this point. So pretty much what happened was people didn't know what they had and they gave it names, and then later on after breeding trials we found out that they didn't have what they thought they had. And so before we found out all of this stuff, we had all these names pop up. So some names for red factor things, now do keep in mind, okay, so red factor is an overarching term for any kind of red enhancing mutation. So cherry is a type of red factor. and it has been isolated and never bred, never crossbred with anything else. So if you get a cherry from SMR, that is going to be a whole other thing that's outside of the coral complex. That is not a part of the coral complex. When I'm talking about the coral complex, what I'm talking about is other red enhancing mutations that are not related to cherry, that are still considered red factor. So there's this like umbrella of red factor, and cherry is on one side of the umbrella and coral complex is on the other side of the umbrella. It is thought that there is more than one different mutation within the coral complex, but none of them have really truly been isolated. So we kind of lump them all together under this coral umbrella. So we have this big umbrella of red factor, and then so there's like cherry and coral, and then coral has its own little umbrella, but we don't really know who's under it, you know what I mean? So some of the names for different types of red factor morphs are salmon. If you see salmon, salmon does not necessarily mean that there are 2 copies of the red factor mutation, though that is the common use of it for a lot of people now. It's actually a line of coral. Bubblegum is another one that a lot of people attributed the sort of yellows and pinks together to be that. Like, that's part of the reason I have this up here. This is actually a like green blotched coral. Here, let me adjust my camera so you guys can see that. That's supposed to be like a green blotched coral snow. Donovan Winterberg made that, and so if you guys really like that, check out Donovan Winterberg. I think he has Drawn to Scales on Facebook. I'll try to link that down below so you guys can check him out if you want. I'm not going to go super into that, but that's part of the reason why that's up there today, because we're talking a little bit about that kind of stuff. So bubblegum was originally thought to be like sort of a green blotched coral snow, but that has kind of faded out. Nobody really uses the term bubblegum anymore. Some people might. And so if they do, just remember that's actually supposed to be another line of snows, of coral snows. A lot of people had their own like lines of coral for some reason that were like all the same mutation technically, but like they just decided to have their own line of it for some reason, and I don't really understand that. But yeah, this isn't the only mutation that has a bunch of different lines, and so I'm going to keep going. Neon is another one, is another form of coral snow. Champagne was another form of coral snow. Coral snows, and specifically stripes. You might actually also see some of these, especially salmon, you might actually see in ghosts as well, so just keep that in mind. Cayenne was another one. Cayenne, I believe that Don Soderbergh came up with that term for some corals. I'm not sure if it was him, but that is a term that I have seen passed around. It's not really in coral snows, but it is a, like, you'll see like Cayenne fires, which are Don's line, I believe, of fires, and that has some sort of red factor mutation in it that I do not believe has anything to do with cherry. It's just a very, very red form of amyl diffuse combination. So if you see Cayenne fire, it's usually a red factor mutation, a coral mutation along with those fires. Cotton candy is another one that was actually a combination of 2 different types of red factors, or 2 different lines of red factors, I'm sorry. So cotton candy was like the original like coral from Don Soderbergh, and then the salmon line were combined, and that was what was called cotton candy. So if you see cotton candy, it's just another form of coral. Red mask was also another one that Don originally called some of the coral lines red mask, especially when it wasn't in a snow. If it was like in an anery, we didn't call it a coral anery, he called it a red mask anery. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The only reason that he doesn't call it that anymore is because red mask was being confused for the morph mask, M-A-S-Q-U-E, which is completely different. And so just to avoid confusion, that name is not really used anymore. So that is it for the coral complex that I'm going to go over. There are a few other things here and there that you might see regarding different types of corals, but all of those are coral. Now, if you do see the term strawberry, keep in mind a lot of people still think that the strawberry mutation adds pinks. So you might see something like strawberry anery, and it'll be super, super pink. It's unlikely that that's a strawberry anery. It's actually more likely that it is a red factor anery, or maybe even just a ghost plus red factor, so just some sort of coral ghost. So just be aware that if you're, dealing with strawberry, a lot of people don't use the term strawberry correctly. The next set that I'm going to go over is sort of the next most controversial. Not super controversial anymore, I would say. I would say that it's been pretty much settled what everything is in this, but there are still a few people that will hold on to certain terms, and that is stuff with Kastanie and Mandarin. So Kastanie had a bunch of different lines of itself that all sort of popped up in different areas. There was a line that popped up in South Africa. There's been a line that popped up in Germany. There's been multiple different lines that popped up in different places, sort of at random. And that's just how it happens. Sometimes gene mutations will pop up randomly. And you don't even you don't even know, the parents didn't necessarily carry that mutation. It just happens multiple times. It could be that it is a gene that is easily mutated for one reason or another, and so that mutation just happens frequently. So Kastanie, if you don't know, it's kind of a hypotype. It's German for chestnut, and if you're in America, it looks like Kastanie to us. I pronounced it Kastanie until somebody corrected me. It's Kastanie. So the different lines of Kastanie that have popped up over the course of the years and years, I would say over the last few decades. Obviously, we had our original Kastanie that I believe was found by a biology teacher, but then after that we had other forms pop up. So copper is one of these terms that popped up, and I believe that copper has been proven to just be a different type of Kastanie. It's not necessarily a separate gene mutation, it's just a different line. Java is one of these. Java was one of the ones that actually looked more different than all the rest of them, so a lot of people really did think that it was going to be a separate mutation. But after some breeding trials, most people have pretty much just come to the conclusion that it's probably just Kastanie. They did have a slightly different look to them. They were a little bit more brown and more frosted in the saddles. But overall, after breeding trials, it's very likely that they're just Kastanie. It doesn't look like there's probably going to be any actual incomplete dominant thing going on with them. Mahogany is another one. I think that mahogany was probably the first one to actually be deemed as just Kastanie. I don't exactly remember off the top of my head what the history of mahogany is, but if you see the term mahogany, it's another one in the Kastanie complex. An orange thing is something that popped up in Steve Roylance's collection not that long ago. And I'm not sure if he has determined it to definitely just be Kastanie, but it is at the very least related to Kastanie. I think that it's either a combination of Sunrise and Kastanie, or it's just Kastanie by itself, and it just looks a little bit different. And this happens when you have different pockets and different breeders kind of breeding their collections over and over again. These mutations pop up and they just end up looking different. So a lot of the snakes, say in South Africa, are all going to be sort of related to each other and have a certain look about them, because breeders over there, they don't have imports and exports a whole lot, and it's the same in Europe and in the UK. There are imports and exports that happen, but it's much more common for them to sort of breed snakes among themselves with people that are closer to them than trying to import from the US other wild types and stuff like that are native here. And so you're going to end up with different looks that pop up. Another one in the Kastanie complex you might hear is the redhead or the German line Kastanie. And so that just is what it sounds like. It is a Kastanie that has a very high red saturation in the head, and then that redness sort of is less saturated near the tail. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a gopher snake that has those really saturated heads and then very little saturation down near the tail. So along the lines of Kastanie, we actually have the A-male version of Kastanie that has a couple of different names. We call it Mandarin in the US, but another very common term for this is actually tangerine. A lot of people will use the term tangerine instead. This is partially cultural because in America we might call them mandarins, but somewhere else they might call them tangerines or vice versa. It was originally, I believe, the term that they were using for the Java A-male, but then of course when Java was pretty much deemed to just be another Kastanie line, the tangerine didn't really stick around that much, at least not in the US, but you do see it pop up once in a while. So if you see the term tangerine, that's what that means. The other term that I've seen pop up more recently, though, is flamingo for this. I think that maybe they started calling it flamingo because it was a little bit more pink. Maybe what they had, maybe it has a little bit of red factor in it or something. I'm not sure. I've seen it pop up a couple of times here and there, and to me, it really just looks like a regular Mandarin. So, not really sure where that came from, but if you do see the term flamingo, it's probably just a Mandarin. The next most controversial thing that I want to talk about, I guess I would say neither of these are super controversial. They're just other like names for things that I thought I would mention since we're here. Now, a lot of people may have heard of Tequila Sunrise. So this is sort of along the lines of Tequila Sunrise. So Tequila Sunrise is actually a line of Ultramels and Snows, or specifically Ultramel Aneries and Snows, that are line bred, and they're very frosted. A lot of people speculate that they might be very closely related to the original hybrid that the Ultra gene came over with. So this line is a lot more like colorful. There's a lot more yellows in it, and it's a lot more frosted. So they are really cool looking. But so now you know what Tequila Sunrise is, but this is sort of related to Tequila Sunrise, kind of, but not exactly. And this was actually brought up to me on one of my previous videos in the comment section. So instead of Tequila Sunrise, this one's actually called Mimosa. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Mimosa, don't worry. I had not heard about it before this either, but it's possible that we might hear more about it later on. Now, from what I can tell, I'm going to go ahead and actually link the Google Drive. It's actually a like Google Sheets file or something like that down below, so that you guys can read about it if you'd like. But from what I can tell from photos in the description, it may not be an actual mutation, but it is sort of a line of snakes that incorporates some similar looks to Tequila Sunrise. So high yellows, a lot of frosting, but there's also this sort of Aztec element to it, like an Aztec type of pattern. So especially the Tesseras in this line have some very wonky patterns. And along with this actually comes the Chaos line of Tesseras. So Mimosa is one thing, but then there's also the Chaos. So if you see Chaos line of Tesseras, it's not really a line, but it's what they're calling Tesseras that have like super crazy patterns and don't even look like Tesseras. So there's just another term to maybe keep in the back of your head. Another term just to keep in the back of your head if you're ever like looking through and you wonder, what is that? The leopard motleys and or jaguar motleys. They've been called both. I believe the original term was jaguar, but they've been calling it leopard instead because leopard kind of makes more sense. Not as many people really understood why it was called jaguar, and then when it was called leopard, people understood why. And that's a motley that actually has instead of the spots like going down the back, I'll try to find a photo for you and put it up. The leopard motleys look really cool. They remind me a lot of Stillman, and so if you have never heard of Stillman, that's another one that I'll mention since we're here. A lot of these are kind of impromptu. I didn't even like think about them until like right now. It's like, oh, I'm talking about it, and so it's just coming up. So leopard reminds me of Stillman in that, so Stillman, I'll just go ahead and describe Stillman, and I'll put a photo up for you. Stillman was not reproducible. It was a wild-caught corn snake, and Steve Rylance worked with it a little bit. The saddle pattern was sort of split down the middle, and the saddles, like the darker colored parts of the snake, sort of lined up along the sides of the body, and there was sort of a lighter colored almost stripe going down the back. So it was just kind of weird. It almost looked like it had kind of a bone pattern on it, but the leopard motleys look very similar to this. The only difference is they actually also incorporate the motley mutation, where the Stillman did not. So Stillman was not reproducible. It was just sort of a fluke. But leopard is reproducible in the selectively bred sense. Another not so controversial one that is just another name that's out there is Red Zeplin. So Red Zeplin is actually the name of a pure Okatee line amel type that popped up in a pure Okatee line. So someone had to, maybe not wild-caught Okatees, but a line that came from wild-caught Okatees, and the amelanistic mutation happened. We obviously had the amelanistic mutation before that happened, but this was the first time that we knew for sure that this was a pure Okati line amelanistic type. It does have a lot of really nice color to it. Like I said, I'll put a photo up for you guys to see. So red Zeppelin is just another term to keep an eye out for. Now I'm going to move on to some of the more controversial ones. And when I say controversial, I mean things that people have gotten into debates about and maybe arguments about, whether I was involved or not. So I'm going to go with the least intense argument or debate that I or someone else I've seen have with someone is over the clown mutation or morph. I don't actually think it's a mutation. It just looks like a scaleless to me. It looks like an Aztec scaleless. And that's why it's kind of controversial, because they're advertising it as being its own line or its own thing or like a new thing. But really, if you look at them, they just look like Aztec scaleless. Like, they don't really look like anything super special. And so I do kind of have a little bit of an issue with people naming something that is exactly the same as something else. So just because, like, since Aztec is not a mutation, combining Aztec with something else does not warrant giving it a new name. You just tack the term Aztec on it. Now, if it was, say, a combination between two actual mutations that had never been done before, so like when the original snows came about, and it's like, obviously this was a combination of amelanistic and anerythristic, so it made sense to give it a new name. But if you don't have mutations being put together that create like a really decently different phenotype, I just don't really see any point in giving it a new name. And I honestly kind of think it's a little bit dishonest, which is part of the reason why this is a little bit controversial. Hey guys, Future Sarah here in editing. I was actually looking through a list of morphs that I hadn't really mentioned before and came across this one that I forgot existed until now, and someone reminded me of it. The Gunston corn snake. Gunston is one that hasn't been super controversial because I think it just hasn't gone very far. This is a corn snake that cropped up in South Africa. Presumably the original was found, like the eggs were like just like found in like a potted plant or something. So it seems like maybe somebody's pet got out and laid eggs. But these snakes are very yellow looking, sort of also hypo looking. To me, they look very similar to what I would expect maybe like a hypo buff to look like. But I'll put as many pictures on the screen as I can find. There's just not that many out there. And I just wanted to mention them because they are something that exists, and I've heard about them off and on. The earliest record that I have of them is in 2010, and that is I found it on sareptiles.co.za. I will put the link down below so you guys can go check out that forum. It's not super long. There's only a couple posts and just a couple pictures, and there's really no explanation of what Gunston corns actually are. To me, like I said, they look like a hypo buff or something like that, or maybe a yellow jacket or something like that. There is no real evidence that they are anything super special, other than they're supposedly a locality that originated in South Africa somehow, and they're kind of yellowish and kind of hypo-ish, and so we're not really sure what they are, and anybody who's ever had any doesn't seem too interested in breeding them or outcrossing them to figure out what they are. I've had 3 separate people come to me and ask me about them over the course of about the last 10 years. The 2010 post that I'm looking at right now is the snakes are adults, so I think that it probably originated back in like 2005, 2007, somewhere around in there, but we just don't have that much information on it, and it was so outside of my thought process that I didn't even put it in my book. So this is information that's not in my book that I will probably go ahead and put into any book update that I do in the future, but I thought you guys should know about it. The next one that I also forgot about, kind of, is similar to this. I actually found this this one when I was looking for Gunston, and it's not controversial at all, but I thought I would mention it because it is out there, and that is the Extreme Locality. And the Extreme Locality, again, is it's a locality of corn snake that I believe they found somewhere around in Florida. This information is in my book, but I forgot to mention it when doing this video the first time, so I thought I would just kind of insert it in here. And it's a locality that looks very much like a very bright hypo type. It's much more, I want to say, red than the Gunston, so I don't think they're the same thing, but they look very hypo. They're a very natural hypo type, and they were caught in the wild, and I think that they're just naturally more hypo looking. I don't think that they're actually a genetic mutation that's causing the hypo. I think similar to Keys and how Keys is much more naturally hypo looking, I think this Extreme wild type is also just a natural hypo by itself. I don't think that it is actually a mutation. It just naturally has less melanin. So I'm going to move on to the rest of the video. So sorry for cutting in, but I thought you guys might be interested in hearing about that. So the next one that is a bit controversial is controversial for a different reason, and I have seen a few people talk here and there about it. I don't want to say people have gotten in debates about it. Maybe debates, yes, but arguments, no. So this is actually going to be the ultimate corn snake. Future Sarah, again, editing even more in the future than the last one. I wanted to actually redo a part of this video because I've learned more about it, and I wanted to sort of let you guys know what's up. So the next morph that I wanted to talk about was Ultimate and Mosaique, and they are used a lot very frequently together. And I wanted to sort of mention the difference between the two of them. Before, I kind of lumped them together because I've seen them together so much, but I wanted to make it clear that they are two different things, and I wanted to explain them sort of separately. So Mosaique, which is spelled with a Q-U-E at the end, instead of where if you're in America, it's probably just spelled with like a C at the end, is sort of Aztec looking or wide stripe looking type of thing that is pretty much proven now to have hybrid origins. It originated in France, and so there is a little bit of a language barrier, at least for me. It's kind of difficult to communicate with the people who originally started this line. But if you look at all of the sort of evidence that is brought through in a lot of different posts, I had to comb through a ton of different Facebook posts, but if you look through all of those, you will see that way back, there was something that had to do with a hypo that might have come over from some sort of jungle corn snake, which is a type of hybrid. If you have not seen my hybrids video, please go check that out. I'll link that up above for you guys. So that is what Mosaique is. I originally, I wanted it really bad to just be a pure corn snake because it is really cool, but just going back, like I said, through all of the evidence that I could find from all of the different posts that the people who own them have made, it seems like they are definitely of hybrid origin. The next one that I wanted to talk about is actually the ultimate mutation, which is actually a mutation, I believe, and it is together with Mosaique a lot, and it makes me wonder if hypo has to, or if the hypo that makes that might actually also be a hybrid. But according to people who have owned them and bred them, they are not compatible with any other hypo mutations that they've bred them with so far. It's been a long time since I've heard a whole lot about the ultimate gene mutation, but I did want to mention it here. It is some kind of hypo mutation, and it is often seen with this Mosaique line, and it's hard to know for sure exactly what it is. I suspect that it is some sort of hypo that that's either of hybrid origin, or it's some kind of hypo that we have seen before, like maybe dilute or something like that, but they just haven't tested it with that. So going back to the original video, I just wanted to insert this information about these mutations as well. Now, these last two are probably going to be the most controversial, at least for me, because the people who I spoke to about these got so upset with me that they blocked me and or banned me from pages because I continued to ask them, what is in this this snake that makes it different? What is it about this that warrants it having a new name? Have you done the test breeding on this well enough to know for sure that this is something new? And they didn't really like me continuing to ask those questions. They just wanted me to say, ooh, pretty, and buy it from them. And I wasn't going to do that without knowing exactly what mutations I was buying, and they just didn't like it, I guess. So the sort of lesser of the two controversial has to be Purple X. So if you've ever seen anything that's Purple X or X Purple, sometimes it's just spelled, it's purple with an X on the end, all one word. Sometimes it's Purple EX. Sometimes it's, sometimes the X is on the beginning of the word. Sometimes it says EX on the beginning of the word. But if you ever see Purple X, it's some kind of lavender type. And the reason that it's kind of controversial, at least for me personally, like I said, is this person was advertising it as this like line of lavender somethings, but to me they really just looked like red factor lavenders, or maybe dilute lavenders, or maybe some combination of that. And at one point I speculated if it was peach, but a few people who were really good with peach told me it doesn't really look like peach, so I'll trust their judgment on that since I haven't worked with peach. But they didn't look like they were beautiful, don't get me wrong, but they didn't look like anything new or special or anything that warranted a new name. I think it would have been much more honest of them to sell them as lavenders plus maybe some other unknown mutation. If I have anything like that in my collection, I'm pretty sure that I have Yellow Jacket running around in my collection. So if I ever see a baby that looks a little bit overly yellow, I would say, it's at least a normal. It might be Yellow Jacket. I'm not sure. Just be honest. Just be honest with what you're selling. Don't advertise it as something if you don't know what it is. Don't just come up with a name for it if you haven't done any kind of teasing out what makes it different from something else that looks exactly the same. And I get it. There are different mutations that look exactly the same for the most part. I mean, if you look at like Lava and Ultra, they look very similar. They're hypotypes. Or if you see even Hypo and Strawberry next to each other, they look very different because they're hypotypes. Or I'm sorry, they look the same because they're hypotypes. If you see Caramel versus Golden, they look the same because they both do very similar things. But we didn't really call it something brand new until we knew for sure that it was something brand new. And I also understand, if you're hey, things are undergoing, this project is undergoing. We're just calling it this until we know for sure what it is. But we wanted to just, sort of set it apart from all of our other lavenders or whatever, so that when people buy it, they know that it's a part of this weird project that we have going on. I think that would have also been more honest than just saying, oh, it's Purple X and it's something cool and new, but we're not going to tell you what it is. Like I said, I just didn't really feel like that was very honest. And he ended up, the person who I spoke to about it, who supposedly hatched the majority of them, he was either in Europe or the UK, because we didn't have any in the US, so I knew that he was somewhere across the pond. I don't know for sure where he was residing. I know that some of the Purple X project has made it to the US, but I haven't heard anything else about it since then. I don't know what it is, and as far as I know, it's still just maybe a red factor lavender. He swears it's not, but I don't know. But that's a term that's out there. I'm not going to talk about it any more than that. I get icky feelings from people when they have a brand new line or a brand new morph or a brand new mutation, but then they have zero to back it up. And that's where we're going to go on to what I consider to be the most controversial of everything on this list, and that is the Marvel Scaleless line. And the reason that this is so controversial is because the person who came up with it will fight you tooth and nail to, if you try to disagree with him or argue with him or ask him anything about them. If you say anything about them other than, wow, that's beautiful, he will fight you and or block you like he did me. And there's literally nothing about them from what I can see that's different from any other Scaleless out there. And that's why this, in my opinion, is different from Purple X, because if you look at Purple X, you can tell there's something different about them. They're not just lavenders. You can tell there's something else going on there. We just don't know what it is. But that's very different from having something very obviously nothing and then just naming it. So that's like having a normal and then just like naming it, you know, the toad variant, and people going, wow, that's amazing, but it looks literally exactly the same as everything else. So I'm going to put a link down below to the Facebook post where he describes what makes them different from everything else. And I'll kind of go over, I'm looking at it right now, I'll kind of go over the things that he said in it. He said that it's overall clean, contrasting, and metallic appearance when freshly hatched, which I don't know if you've ever seen wet skin. Like, you can actually maybe see wet skin on my face right now. It looks very metallic because, like, I put lotion on my skin before I came in here. I had just gotten out of the shower. So yes, wet skin looks metallic. And when baby scaleless corn snakes come out of the egg, they're going to look metallic. They're going to look metallic because it's wet skin. So that kind of annoys me. But okay, we'll just say that's what it is. Reduced flank patterns. Yeah, I mean, that's like every scaleless ever. Scaleless does sort of some weird funky things with the pattern. So to me, that just seems like normal scaleless things. He also said that that is often coupled with the saddles creating a sort of dripping appearance, which, again, that's a very normal scaleless thing. And reduced or almost no belly pattern, which, again, is a normal scaleless thing that just happens in scaleless. And the reason this frustrates me so much, there's a few different things. For one, he has said, he's contradicted himself a lot in what Marvel actually, like, how it's affected. So I have screenshots of someone asking, is this a strictly scaleless mutation? And he said yes. But then he also, like, will post on his page that there's a scaled Marvel. So is it just a scaleless mutation? So is it something that only appears in scaleless, similar to how pied can only be in diffused? Or is it something that can be seen in scaled corns? Which is it? It can't be both, right? It has to be one or the other, I would assume, which he hasn't, like, explained that contradiction at all. I asked him multiple times, begged him, frankly, to show me pictures of the snakes side by side of like a Marvel scaleless and a regular scaleless next to each other. Like, it's easy to do. It's super easy to do. You just go, you get, you know, you can get a screenshot off of Google. You can go, there's a million pictures of scaleless corn snakes. Just go get one of them, any of the decent ones, and put it next to yours in, just like in a post, and say, here's the difference, and point it out, put arrows. Like, it's not hard. I've done it 1,000 times for people. If what you have is really unique and different, it should not be hard to just put the things together and be like, this is what makes it different. It should not be hard to just point it out. And I asked, and friends that I know asked, and I was blocked because he's like, oh, you're never going to believe me even if I do point it out. And I was like, that's not how I function. How I function is when new evidence is brought to my attention, I change my mindset. So if you have actual proof and actual evidence of what you're saying, and you can show it to me plain as day and prove me wrong, like, please, I am begging you, I'm on my knees begging you to prove me wrong. Like, literally, I was like, please, for the love of corn snakes, prove me wrong. And he couldn't. All he could do was block me and ban me from his page. And so I'm sorry that I got a little heated, but that is why, to me, this is the most controversial thing, because he will fight anyone tooth and nail, and he will say that it is a dominant mutation. He claims it's a dominant mutation that's reproducible every time, but there's nothing about it that's different from a regular scaleless to me. Like, he still... I've looked through every photo. I have looked down. I have zoomed into different scales. I've zoomed into patterns. And you guys know, I'm like, if I'm good at anything, it's corn snake morphs. If I'm good at anything, it's telling the difference between one thing and another thing in corn snake morphs. Even if it's down to the most minor little detail. I will be able to tell the difference. And I can't tell the difference between these and a regular scaleless. And yes, I might not be the best at scaleless because I don't own them, but Just show me the difference. Like, that's all I'm asking. I'm literally just asking you to show me the difference. Okay, I'm gonna be done with this video. It was way too long. I probably should have even chopped this up into multiple different sections, like, or multiple different videos, but here we are. I'm at the end. So thank you so much for watching. If you watched this long, please subscribe and share, or at least share the information and let them know where you heard the information from, because word of mouth is amazing for me. And thank you again. Like I said, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.